Come on in and confirm the audio, folks. And we shall begin the show that we deserve. Right? Take your front seats. You're all looking very pretty, I'm sure. Right? So let's begin. Yes, I can hear you, says Mr. Barun Sharma. Good morning, Mr. Sharma. Now that you can hear me, we'll have the show that we deserve. Right? It makes everything worth it. Everything worth it. It's such a beautiful start to the day. Informs us, inspires us. Boom, boom, boom. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We are working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis, which don't lead to paralysis, right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go. But before we go, gotta follow tradition, right? You know the tradition. You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together and bring us good luck, as it always does, without fail, every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug or glass or tank, a chalice or stein, a canteen jug or flask or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like some hot water with black pepper in it. And here we go. Beautiful. Let's do it again. Sublime. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you're not alone. It says that we are in this together. That's such a beautiful thing to say. And you know why I can't stop at just one simultaneous sip? Because it's irresistible, right? You need another one. With that out of the way, let's begin. So, there's an India Mobile Congress happening. I wasn't invited. But PM Modi actually spoke of something. He said India among elite 5 as 4G tech stack set for exports. So India is going to be exporting its 4G tech stack, which is great news because it means that this particular technology is pretty sorted out as far as this country is considered. We have a decent 5G penetration and we are exporting 4G. So he quoted a few numbers. He said that the country has emerged as a manufacturing hub with mobile phones productions 28 times more than 2014 and exports surging 127 times. So 28 times in 10 years and 127 times exports in 10 years. More than 10 years actually, 12 years approximately, which is great news. So like a true salesman. Now, what did we say was the primary job of the Prime Minister of a country, right? Like India. What was the primary job of the Prime Minister of the country of India? Anybody wants to take a guess? We've talked about this, right? What is the primary job profile? Come on, be quick with this, folks. CEO, says Mr. Varun Bhardwaj. Well, that's close. And what does a CEO need to do? He needs to sell, right? So, a CEO or the Prime Minister of a company is supposed to be the chief salesman of the country. Sales, Mr. Bhardwaj says. And promoting brand India, says Mr. Sumant Kumar. And that's correct. So, once again, in his sales avatar, he says, this is the best time to invest, innovate, and make in India. From manufacturing to semiconductors, mobiles to electronics, and startups across sectors, India is brimming with possibilities and energy. So like a true sales guy, he said, please make in India, invest in India, and it's an innovative ground, fertile ground for a lot of exports and so on and so forth. So that's the prime responsibility of the prime minister of the country, and he's on it, right? So at least build the right culture of a country. Mind you, culture is not religion, says Mr. Manju Madhabal. Of course, and we've said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So we've always said culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's not we who said it. Peter Drucker, sir, said it way, way before us. But what that means is that whatever strategies the country applies, you know, they fail to do anything, they fail to move the needle unless the culture is strongly aligned with it. And with that thought, we need to come to the story of the DEG polluted cough syrups killing in India. So when in 2022, Indian cough syrups exports started killing people, little kids, like 26 kids were killed in Gambia and then Uzbekistan, uh, Indian pharmaceuticals were advised to check everything before they exported it, right? Because every bad export ruined the country's reputation, it ruined the country's image, it created a bad image of the entire nation, right? If India wants to call itself as the pharmacy of the world, and then the pharmaceutical products and exports of the country lead to deaths among children, it creates a very, very bad image. And it's not even about the image, it's just bad, something very bad in every way, right? You don't want children to be killed. Now, when that happened, a lot of exports were scrutinized as they should have been, right? Because diethylene glycol, that impurity, it's not supposed to kill people in 2025. We're talking about Vikasit Bharat in 2047, right? These DEG impurities were killing people in US in 80s, 70s, 60s, 1930s and so on and so forth, right? How can they kill people in 2025? It's not good, right? Now, why do you think is that it has happened? Has it happened because of a strategic blunder? No, it's not happened because of a strategic blunder. It's happened because of a cultural blunder. Culture of Indian manufacturers not following GMP. GMP is good manufacturing practices. Culture of Indian manufacturers importing excipients and then mixing them up with good excipients just to save money. So they're importing Chinese stuff, or dubious traders, they're getting their excipients from them. Culture of Indian babus sidestepping all sorts of regulatory checks on the manufacturing processes, right? And the transportation, or let's say approval of it. So it's a cultural malaise in India which has led to kids dying in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, right? And to promote the culture, what can you do to promote good culture? We've talked a lot about that, but that thing is essentially taking a lot of heat now for the pharmaceutical companies, and the government is essentially going to spearhead more reforms as far as checking those gaps is considered. Now, the government has been on it, and it's not new that pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities are supposed to be extremely compliant, yet it has happened, right? So it's not strategy, it's culture. Uh, Mr. Abhishek Sharma says, after 2022, until now, fortunately, there were no bad news due to cough syrups. Since this has happened now, it looks like there are still huge gaps. So there weren't these gaps because exports were monitored, imports weren't, and it just took 3 years for everything to settle down in its place, right? So it's a cultural malaise. So when Mr. Manju Madhabal says right culture of the country, that's absolutely right. And how do you fix the culture of this country, right? It is, how big is this question? It's a $4.2 trillion question right now, right now, right? So I just hope we are able to do that, because everything falls back on that, right? If you look at the judiciary, the rotten judiciary we have, the rotten Babu Shahi we have, these people are supposed to be enforcers of law and order, of regulations, of compliances, and so on and so forth. And if these people essentially carry on with bad practices or encourage bad practices or incentivize bad practices, how do you see trickling down of that, right? It manifests in all sorts of things. So if you look at police, if you look at a judiciary, if you look at Babushahi, bureaucracy, these three, so police is essentially law enforcement. Uh, Administration, bureaucracy is basically administration. Judiciary is law implementation, right? If these three pillars of socio-political governance are what they are, the culture implementation of it becomes very, very difficult. But that's what the country has to solve. Let's see how we can do that. Good news, by the way, on a strategic front, crude cheapening is going to be a very good deal for government next year, right? Because the Brent is going to be $52 per barrel. Right now it's at 67. Yeah, at this moment it's at 71, right? The average of it, the current price is 66, but the average for this year has been 71. You know what happens when the crude goes down, right? What happens when the crude goes down? India's GDP becomes better. We import like $158 billion worth of crude every year. $158 billion is a lot of money. When that money gets reduced from our forex, from our exchequers, from basically our GDP, it leads to a lot of problems. Import of crude also ties our hands in a lot of ways as far as geopolitics is considered. With crude going cheaper, it's going to be very, very good for the country. Now, is it going to be good for you? Is a very good question. So two ways this is going to pan out. Number one, the government just reduces price of petrol, right, from the pumps, like the OMCs, oil marketing companies. It leads to them and they reduce the price. If price of fuel goes down, price of everything goes down, right? The best way to cut inflation is to just reduce the cost of fuel, cost of energy. Because when transportation goes down, everything goes down. That's why American politics had drill baby drill, right? They believed a lower energy cost will solve all problems. And they're right. They're right. So it's going to be good for you. Now, an indirect way it's going to be good for you is because the government is going to be making a lot of money, right? If the import costs decrease, there's going to be a tax margin which is going to expand, which is going to lead to some government coffers getting filled up. Now, it's going to be good news for the Babu first because he's going to eat most of it, right? And then it's going to be good for you, but it's going to be good for you anyway. So that's a good news. Price of crude is going to come down. India is buying more Russian oil, by the way. Refiners expected to boost Russian oil imports in the coming month as trade talks with Washington drag on, discount widens amid ample supply. So India is obviously going to buy more Russian crude, the refineries. That's no surprise. That should be surprising. Mr. Abhishek Sharma writes, digitization can have huge impact in cultural shift across judiciary and law enforcement. No. Digitization is a strategic answer to a problem. Right? It can have cultural ramifications as a second order effect, right? But it doesn't solve for the cultural problem. Of course, digitization has led to revolutionary effects when it comes to DBT, direct benefit transfers, and a lot of ways. When people used to be taking cash, a lot of cash used to get eaten up in the process. Now, direct benefit transfers happen through UPI. People get them in their bank accounts. But even then, what are you seeing? You're seeing fake bank accounts. You're seeing many getting routed through those fake bank accounts to other people, right? So digitization is a strategic answer to the problem. Cultural problem is dealt with in a cultural way. I hope that clarifies. Moving on. SEBI is gearing up for dealing with quantum risks for safety, because quantum computing essentially is a safety hazard, password hackings, and so on and so forth. SEZs, special economic zones, are seeking norms and sale flexibility for quality control, minimum import price, port restrictions, and so on and so forth. SEZs are looking at some regulatory ease, which should not be surprising. SEZs have a lot of regulatory ease as compared to everywhere else, but they want more. Should India be easing the import play for SEZs? That's a question. That's a question. By the way, whenever you look at news, I've come to learn of a very interesting way of looking at life. So I should share it, right? There's something called Gel. Uh, what was it? I forgot. Uh, Gel amnesia. Gelman amnesia. So Gelman amnesia. You know what Gelman amnesia is? It says that it's basically a cognitive bias. Now that cognitive bias, how it came to be, is an interesting story. The Gelman uh, looked at something in the news. Okay. Now when he was reading the news or when he was watching the news, he believed the news to be true for things he didn't know about, right? So he was watching the news and he was like fine with the data, right? He was fine with the data. But when it came to news about which he was expert in, right? Some place where he was an actual expert, he found the news to be always incorrect, right? He found the news to be lying either by omission or by commission, or it was missing context, or it was basically just wrong information. So he said that I'm looking at the news and I'm finding out that whatever I know very deeply, the news is fake about that, right? But whatever I don't know, the news is fine. So what is the probability of the news being fake about everything? About everything. Not just about what I know, but about everything. So Gilman Amnesia says that news is fake. Essentially, news is fake about everything in every way, right? And the only way you find out that the news is fake is when you are an expert at something, right? Now, Gell-Mann amnesia, when you are an expert at something, you find out that the news is fake. Only when you're an expert of something. Now, a new way of looking at it would be, how do you know that you are an expert at something? How do you know that you are an expert at something? The answer is, if you can find out where the news is fake, right? So if you're looking at a news piece, or let's say if you're looking at chat GPT answers to something, right? And if you believe the answer 100%, okay, that means you're not really an expert in that field. How does that feel, right? Only if you're a very deep expert is when you're going to be able to find gaps in whatever the world is telling you. Gell-Mann amnesia. How does that make you feel, right? That's why I always begin the show by saying reading between the lines. It's not just reading. It's not just looking at the news piece, right? It's about reading between the lines to be able to find the bullshit, essentially. Moving on. Just 1 second, folks. Just 1 second. I'll have to take a second. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. How do I do this? Hi, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Am I audible again? Can you hear me, guys? Is it good? I'm sorry for that. Uh, there was some thing that I needed to address. But yeah, Gell-Mann amnesia. Perfect. So that is now whenever you're looking at something, you know uh, how to evaluate that situation. Okay. Moving on. Shell is restarting spring energy sale process. Now, Shell had bought uh, Spring Energy in for $1.5 billion in 2022, and it's fully exiting from the 5 gigawatt green portfolio after partial sale attempts fell through. So it wanted to sell parts of Spring Energy, but it couldn't. So now it's basically looking at a full exit. At the same time, Semcorp is buying Renew's 300 megawatt solar power unit. Now, what I don't understand is why is there so many secondary transactions happening in renewable energy, right? Why are there so many secondary transactions? What that means is people are buying things out, right? Shell is selling its spring energy unit. Renew Power is basically selling its plant of 300 megawatts. Why is this happening? If an industry is essentially growing in a lot of ways, right? Solar is supposed to be a sunrise industry. How are secondary deals happening so much and not so much of primary deals? Now, is there something that we are missing? That there's so many buyouts happening in this play, but not many new projects coming in, right? Or are we missing new projects? So that's something to watch out. Why are these people selling their solar power units? Like a Norway company, Statkraft, sold its unit as well, even before it was complete. One of the acquisitions happened even before they had just like begun monetizing that play. So there's something that we need to study there, right? Moving on. ED has filed a complaint against Rashmi Saluja in an ESOP case. Now we've discussed, Mr. Manju Madhabal says because VCs are getting into that kind of investment. Those are called type 2 investments. No, VCs are not getting into that kind of investments. Solar power units are not VC's domain, right? Not at all. So that's private capex happens very differently. Major corporations place bonds, ECBs, and so on and so forth to set these things up. It's above VC pay grade. But anyway, ED has filed a complaint against Rashmi Saluja. So people know about Religear's takeover by Dabur, by Burman family. And Rashmi Saluja, Miss Rashmi Saluja was essentially fighting it off because Dabur's buying Religear meant she was going out. So she tried to fight it in every way, right? One of the ways was that she got ESOPs in a subsidiary of Religear, which was essentially an anti-corporate governance thing. And that ED has decided that it was a crime, and 178 crore worth of ESOPs provided to these people, to Madam Saluja, were proceeds of a crime. So this was a very, very interesting story. Dabur was looking at taking over Religear. She was trying to fight it. She tried to throw dirt at Dabur. Dabur tried to throw dirt at her. Dabur essentially won. And now she's facing ED's raids and so on and so forth. Moving on. So a lot of supply chain dominance being looked at. Speaking of dominance, RBI is looking at new lending platform to expand credit access and inclusion. So it's basically DPI kind of a thing, right? The RBI wants AA framework and the newly launched Unified Lending Interface (ULI) platform can play a keen role in expanding credit access and inclusion. So essentially, they're looking at making a UPI kind of DPI called ULI, Universal Lending Interface, which basically makes it easy for credit to be provided to people, right? And that is a good move, of course. India is a credit-starved nation. Introducing standards designed to improve customer onboarding experiences, enhance user interface, and so on and so on. Enhance the security as well. So this is one of the many moves that RBI is trying out, right? Simplifying KYC is one. KYC has been a bone in the neck for a very, very long time for RBI, for everybody. So simplifying that, new lending platform, and so on and so forth. Let's see how these things shape up. Good plans on paper, but are they gonna work like UPI worked? Let's see. Let's see. I think the aspect of ULI, or let's say credit being an underserved problem, is itself not that, uh, it doesn't click with me well. While it definitely makes sense to expand the reach of credit, right? However, whenever you try to do that, the loans and delinquencies rise. So I think the audience for credit is fundamentally limited, and it takes time for people to actually go to that level where they can take a loan and pay it back without causing systemic problems in a way, right? But that's just a short term way of looking at things. When you're designing things like these, it's always a long term thing. Similar arguments were made against UPI. They said poor people are not going to be able to use UPI because they don't have phones, and poor people will not be able to use UPI because there's no internet, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't make sense for phone banking to work in India. That's what P. Chidambaram said, right? But that turned out to be wrong because that was a short term way of looking at things. Right now, it doesn't make sense to expand credit to everybody, right? Or make it easier to for credit access to be provided. But in future, when you're talking about the country in the next 5 years, 7 years, it definitely makes sense. So that's the contrary perspective, right? Moving on, IT and pharma top the FPI sell list. Well, that's once again something that I told you about, right? Everybody said, Mr. Ravi Kumar Gupta has a comment. New projects in solar are coming. The secondary market deals means that the sector is mature now. Well, that's one way of reading the situation. This is in reference to the secondary deals, overwhelming secondary deals. Well, that's one way of the looking at situation. But if you follow the market very closely, you'll see that primary deals are not that overwhelmingly large in quantity. Let's say, as if you relate them with the secondary deals, yes, overwhelming. But also when you talk about maturity of the market, how is the market mature? It's supposed to be a blue ocean play, right? It's supposed to be a very growing market. It is not supposed to be a mature market right now. Indian solar play is supposed to be a growing green field right now. It's not supposed to be a mature market, right? And that's exactly what secondary deals say. So you're right, Mr. Gupta, when you say that secondary deals signals maturity of the market, but that shouldn't be the case, is the contention, right? Moving on. So we were talking about IT and pharma being top of the sell list, FPI. Well, that shouldn't be surprising to anybody, least of all the viewers of Thinkers Frequency. Moving on. S&P 500 started rally seen having more fuel left from AI and US Fed. So more fuel left in the US rally. As I said, most of what's happening in the US markets is happening because of AI, because of the AI play. And the AI market is very, very interesting right now. So for a very long time, ever since this thing blew up, right, we saw Nvidia making 90% of all the profits that were being made in AI. So every bit of money that was being made in AI was being made by one single company, and that was Nvidia, right? Because it made all the chips. So everybody bought those chips, and whatever models Microsoft, OpenAI, Grok, everybody made, it was basically just Nvidia making all the money. Software wasn't making money, right? Like ChatGPT still loses a lot of money on the $20 subscription it sells you, right? Now what's happening is that Nvidia is basically investing a lot of money in its client companies, money which then these companies pay it back in the form of buying its semiconductors. Chips are considered. So what's happening here is a lot of cyclical transactions. Nvidia pays something, invests something in Grok. Grok buys Nvidia's chips. Nvidia invests in OpenAI. OpenAI buys Nvidia's chips, and so on and so on and so on. So that's what's happening. AI essentially is becoming a very circular kind of a play where one company which was making all the profits in AI is essentially routing its profits back to the clients so that clients can pay it back. And everybody, and the valuations are rising as we speak. Now, is this uh, a sign of a bubble? Well, of course. Of course. When will it not be a bubble? When these client companies essentially start making money, not by financial engineering, but by their own business model, right? And that hasn't happened. Yes. Is this legal? Of course, this is legal. Of course, this is legal. Is this legal? Asks Mr. Tushar Tiwari. Well, of course, this is legal. Nvidia can invest. So, this looks like just a way of showing good balance sheets rather than actual value addition. So, Nvidia says that all these AI training companies, they need a lot of money, right? And it's very happy to partner with Elon Musk, Mr. Musk. Mr. Jensen says that whatever Musk is involved in, I need to be a part of that, right? And he says my only regret is that why didn't I invest in him earlier? Why did I miss out on XAI investments earlier? Well, obviously, you missed it because it's a pretty new deal. XAI is just now worth $300 billion, and it's raising a lot of money, right? And all that money which is raising from Nvidia is basically going back to Nvidia, which is very fascinating, right? RBI has launched 4 digital pay initiatives: Reserve Pay, Banking Connect, right? Something called IoT payments with UPI, UPI Help, IoT Connect, Reserve Pay, and so on and so forth. Uh, so this is IoT plays connected devices, TVs, and so people can pay through the devices. Reserve Pay is of course securing credit limits. UPI Help is, you can imagine what it is, and Banking Connect, an interoperable net banking solution for offering seamless payments and standardized purchases. Well, that's obviously UPI, right? So that's that. Moving on. PM Modi is batting for Swadeshi products for empowering India. Well, this is very, very necessary. So, Mr. Amit Shah has written a tweet. If you've known about it, if you've seen it, he wrote that I'm shifting my email to Zoho. People can reach out to me at Amit Shah, whatever, Zoho. And he said, thank you for your attention to this matter, which is essentially a dig at Donald Trump, Mr. Trump, right? And this is just brilliant, right? I've long been saying, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, that government needs to expedite the adoption of Indian-made technology tools. We are a colony of US and China when it comes to technology. Just like Europe, we don't have to be, we shouldn't be. Wherever we can, we should replace these people. We should replace ChatGPT and XAI and Perplexity ASAP, right? We should have our own models somehow getting adopted by everybody. So what can the government do for adoption of these models? It can give a free subscription to all its government employees, right? Of Servam or whatever local companies. And it can have its own models getting trained, because whatever time we are spending on these platforms, we are essentially training their models, right? We are just another wave. It's another wave that we are missing. We missed out on the internet wave. We have no internet company of our own. Of course, there are a few good companies like Naukri, Just Dial, Make My Trip. But apart from that, we lost the entire social networking play. We lost the search play. We cannot lose the AI play again to these people. And Zoho is a step in that direction, which is awesome. We just need to do that in AI as well, right? Moving on. Universal Social Security, National Employment Policy to focus on universal inclusion. This is one of, worker welfare thing. Niti Aayog is planning a tech-driven mission for 490 informal workers. 490 informal workers, that's a lot of people, right? What is the number of formal employees of this country, formal workers of this country? Can you guess what's the number of formal employees of this country? It says 490 informal people, right? That's obviously half the country's population, almost 49 crore. What do you think is the formal number, people employed in the formal sector, right? That is, when I last did a research, it was about 30 million people. 30 million people, I guess. Number of Indians employed, number of Indians with formal employment. The last did 88 million people with 25% non-agri jobs. 120 million people. Okay, now that 60 million people are formally employed from social security perspective. So not 30 million, but 60 million people, right? And 490 million informal workers. So a lot of small medium businesses. That's why small medium businesses are extremely important for the country, because they basically are almost 10 times the formal economy, right, as far as employment opportunities are considered. Moving on, DBT through Aadhaar seems to be a must for central schemes. Well, that's obviously true. Bid to enhance transparency. We've talked a lot about that. So a lot of welfare stuff happening. Unfortunately, welfare schemes are taking a lot of money away from good practices. Like somebody was pointing out that ISRO's budget in 2014 was something, and ISRO's budget has only grown very moderately. However, at the same time, the subsidy budgets of this country, right, the Ladli Behen Yojnas and stuff like that, they're like 10x, right? So we are spending 10x on these appeasement, politically inclined subsidy schemes. Then we are actually spending on research, development, and all sorts of good things, right? Capex plans. So India is moving towards pure optimism and pure pessimism. So if you look at India's story, there's a lot of pure optimism because there are a lot of good things happening, right? The PM being a very good salesperson. And at the same time, if you look at where the money is going for all the Ladli Behens of the world, you know, there's pure pessimism also at play, which is just extraordinary. Moving on. Gaza truce talks are moving forward. Hamas has essentially submitted a list of hostages and prisoners for the swap deal. However, nothing is set in stone. A lot of key things remain dubious. So let's see how this development happens. If Israel and Hamas stop the war, the only standing big major war which will be continuing would be Russian war with Ukraine. And if that also gets solved, it's going to be a pretty good time for the markets. A pretty good time, right? But what do they say? That war is a distraction for many real problems. So maybe after that war essentially subsides, you know, you're going to see some real financial shocks happening in the system, right? Because war essentially hides a lot of these things in plain sight. Speaking of things that are hidden, gold crosses $4,000. $4,000 is how much is it, right? 80 it's a lot of money, man. Almost 4 lakhs, I guess. So $4,000 is for the first time on Wednesday as investors piled on the safe haven investment over various economic concerns, right? So gold is going up. We've been talking about what it signals. We've said it very, very explicitly what this means for the entire economy of the world, right? If the last time this was happening, we should never do analogy thinking. Every situation is different. So I'll forget about the analogy. But when people are so hell-bent on stocking up of a conventional asset like gold, which is said to be a hedge against financial instability of the world at large, it signals that something is basically getting screwed with the system, and there could be an unraveling sometime soon, right? When it happens, nobody knows, but if it happens, it's going to be a big problem. So that's what the gold signals. Moving on. Chip shares fall after US panel slams China sales, right? So there's a lot of Chinese action happening as far as the chip thing is considered. First of all, China is saying that we are going to make our own chips. We don't need Nvidia second-hand chips, which could have a backdoor or something from US. So that's happening. But at the same time, a lot of people are selling to Chinese military related deals, right? So a lot of these tech companies are essentially selling to military related organizations and companies of China, which is just so sad, right? Which is how shitty people work, right? So Google was essentially working directly with Chinese military, right? That's what Peter Thiel sir essentially pointed out. So these people like these, this is the cultural problem. They have no nation, right? These people have no ethics. They're going to sell to the enemy, as they have. And they're going to sell weapons to the enemy because it suits them. So that's what's happening. And it's going to be different from here on. Moving on. Cristiano Ronaldo, the footballer, has become the first football player to be a billionaire. $1.4 billion estimated net worth, right? Now this is where the Gell-Mann amnesia thing occurs. So a lot of celebrities, when they were reading about themselves in the media, they found out that this is bullshit, right? This is a lie, right? And then when they were reading about themselves, it was always a lie. So then they started reading about other celebrities, and then they got reminded about when they read about themselves, and they were like, okay, this could also be a lie, right? Whatever you are an expert in, it's going to be a problem. Moving on. RBI ready to do heavy lifting on loan risk weights. Cut risk weights, link them to borrower profiles under draft norms. So risk weights are getting adjusted by RBI. Why do you think RBI is adjusting the risk weights? Can you guess why BBB rated companies will have a risk weight of 75% against 100% from before? And credit card users who have repaid their dues will have a lower risk weight, and so on, right? Unrated MSMEs will have an 85% weight against 100%. Why do you think that is happening? To improve the flow of money, to improve credit growth, says Mr. Sumant Kumar, and that is 100% right. So banks have been, for a very long time, till 2016, banks were reeling under the pressure of NPAs, bad banking, bad loans, phone banking, corruption, scandals, so on and so forth, right? So it took 10 years for Indian banking to essentially correct its balance sheets, right? To fix systemic risks, systemic problems. In 2020, you know what happened, right? 2019 was it? Yes Bank. So a lot of problems happened with Indian banking. And now that Indian banking has essentially formed a robust regulatory compliant system and a robust balance sheet environment, RBI is looking at putting pedal to the metal, which is exactly why you're looking at risk weight adjustments. So some money could have a greater velocity, as they say. Moving on. So if you need some numbers, yeah, I already told you the numbers. Indian banks resilient, says S&P. S&P well placed to navigate global tariffs, weakening rupee. Banks credit cost to rise 80 to 90 BPS in the next 2 years. Well, I've said for 132 days that Indian banking is gonna have good days. And that's exactly panning out. If you've been following for 130 days, you're going to know, right? How we talked about banking, how we said banking was a bad idea, how we said it's going to be a good idea, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what's happening. That's very nice. Quick question, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma. This looks like positive news for banks. Still, there was some news of challenges for private sector banks. No, no, no. Mr. Sharma, you are mistaken. We discussed about how private banks were being looked at as opportunities to start investing in. That was the report. You're talking about yesterday's analysis, right? Where there was a brokerage report which said, is it a good time to enter the private sector, private banks? So private banks have been lagging behind, as compared to public sector banks, and they were not good bets uh, stock wise, right? For a very long time. So if you look at Kotak, if you look at all these people, they've been lagging behind, right? Now it's flipping. And that's exactly what we said. Speaking of exactly what we said, this phrase, I got a feedback yesterday. I said that I was talking about Tata, and probably when I was speaking extemporaneously, it came out that I was actually chastising Tata Group. Well, I wasn't. I wasn't. It seemed like I was being disrespectful to Tata Group. I wasn't. I wasn't at all. I have all the respect for Tata Group. I just, I had no intentions of disparaging a failure, right? You should never talk bad of failures because there's a lot of things happening at play, right? So uh, it's okay, it happens, is what I mean. And I was just pointing out a bad. So my problem was with the feedback I got to my ideas when I shared them 2 or 3 years ago. So, in the quest of actually mocking those bad feedbacks which I received, right? I essentially sounded like I was mocking Tata Group. I wasn't. I wasn't, right? People can make mistakes, strategies can go wrong, a lot of things can happen, and that's completely fine. Nobody should ever mock anybody for anybody's failure, right? So if you've been watching, I've always been very pro. Success stories and so on and so forth, right? I speak a lot of good things about Ather, Urban Company, and all sorts of companies in every way. I talk good things about the country. I want the country to succeed, and Tata Group has been part of the nation building exercise before even before nation building was a word, right? But in the quest of responding to the criticism I got while I was sharing those ideas, it sounded like I was being disrespectful to Tata Group. So I'm sorry about that, right? And also the I told you so tone, it's not that great. And I don't want to be a proponent or a regular user of I told you so. But I'm just, whenever I'm saying that we predicted it and had good, it's to essentially give context to the new viewers that what happens on this show, right? So we make predictions every day and we see those predictions turning out, and that's exactly what I so it's not an I told you so, it's basically giving people. So I'm sure the old viewers of Thinkers Frequency already have context, so they wouldn't doubt the integrity of what I try to do. But somehow, if somebody new feels that, hey man, you're touting your own horn for a very long time, it's not that. Moving on. Mahindra and Mahindra is basically demerging cars, tractors, trucks, divisions, and so on and so forth, right? Mahindra and Mahindra is demerging. Now, why do companies demerge, folks? Why do you think is Mahindra demerging its car and farm equipments and so on and so forth? Why do you think it's happening? Can anybody guess? Why do companies demerge? This is a very good question, and if you know about markets, if you've been watching Thinkers Frequency, you should know why these companies are getting demerged. Mr. Suman Kumar says attract more investment. That's great, but how? They're going to go IPO with all these different units. Value unlock, correct. Because every company has its own, investment, let's say, what's the right way to put it? Horizon, right? What happens is that growth prospects of all companies are not the same. Okay, so a car division has a different growth prospect than, let's say, a tractor division or a truck division or something of that sort. Trucks, EV trucks and so on, they are a completely different game, right? And they have a completely different trajectory which is going to happen. But if it's all merged with the car, the good divisions, basically it gets averaged out, and you don't want that averaging out to happen, right? So once these things mature, once these things grow up and they have a life of their own, they have journeys of their own, they can attract more money as separate entities instead of in as compared to whatever they're going to attract as one single unit, right? So right answer, Mr. Sumant Kumar says attract more investment. Mr. Tiwari says value unlock. Mr. Abhishek Sharma says more independence. Mr. Sumant Kumar says with IPO demerger company. To give an example, Apollo Hospitals demerging Apollo Pharmacies with which has more growth potential. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. So you are 100% right. That's exactly what's happening. Moving on. China seeks India assurance on no heavy rare earth diversion to US. So China has been hoarding the rare earths. It's been using rare earths as a trade negotiation strategy, and it says that if you want the rare earths from us, you can't divert them for US to US, and also you cannot use them for defense purposes. So these two things China has been very solidly playing out, right? It's basically an arm twist. At the same time, the 7,300 crore rare earth scheme has been okayed, right? Okay, so Mr. Abhishek Sharma, right? This is interesting. Why doesn't China do the same for Pakistan? Well, Pakistan is a vassal state of China. So also Pakistan doesn't have any manufacturing of its own to speak of, right? Pakistan is a shithole. The biggest mistake India does culturally is to equate itself with Pakistan in any way, right? That's something very sad that happens. Moving on. So rare earth scheme has been okayed. Now it's going to go to the cabinet. The panel okayed it. Now it's going to go to the cabinet. Cabinet's going to okay it, and then some real work will begin, hopefully. Moving on. IAF chief backs indigenous weapons. Bharat Dynamics is establishing a propellant plant in Donakonda in Andhra Pradesh. Right? Andhra CM Naidu sir has pitched corridor to Rajnath Singh in May 23, and that's exactly what's happening. Propellant making facility is the first big ticket investment in Andhra defense corridor. Now this is great news. Bharat Dynamics. I've been talking about the defense sector for a very, very long time, right? And a lot of things are shaping up like that. Now what do we want to see? We want to see a lot of startups coming up in defense, a lot of action on drone tech, which is missing. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but India is playing with drones as if it's a side story, right? It is not the side story, it's the main track. Somehow there's no good news in that direction. I hope there comes to be. Moving on. A lot of political chit chat which we don't discuss, and that's so great, right? We've also talked about the pharmacy play. So you know what? This is not related to any analysis, but I was looking forward to feedback. I always take feedback from, and some viewers of Thinkers Frequency are very kind. They share, what they think can make the show more interesting, and not just the show, but the whole intellectual exercise more interesting. And one viewer actually called me out on the way I talk at the show, and he says that you talk really well in general, but when we're discussing data, right? You essentially do a lot of ums, ahs, breaks, and so on and so forth. So I started noticing that why do I start talking in a very artless way when I'm discussing data? Because the brain gets so divided in the midst of all the information overload that I'm trying to process, and I'm trying to filter, and I'm trying to lay it on you, right? Which turns out to be a bit of an issue. So if you noticed any difference today, because I tried speaking in a better way today, at least in the beginning, and then I lost my train of thought. Maybe I went into data. So if you notice some changes as far as my speech is considered, right? For whenever I'm sharing data with you, whenever I'm sharing some deep analytics with you, please let me know. That'll be helpful. I want to improve at least, right? So it could be a gift to we give to ourselves, some improvement, and it'd be good for you because you'll not be listening to some kind of a gibberish, right? CDSCO, steps of heat on state units amid cough syrup lapses. So we talked a lot about that. WHO is seeking answers, right? Hey, these kids are dying in your country. What about the cold drift that you exported to other countries, right? And then there's been some actions against the pediatricians and so on and so forth. But overall, it's not the pediatrician, it's not some small company that these people are going to suffer. The real culprit is the bureaucracy, which essentially gave a green tick when they shouldn't have, right? So it's the bureaucracy which killed the industry. It's the bureaucracy which killed the credibility. It's the bureaucracy which killed people, right? But who are we going to punish? Some manufacturing unit which screwed up. Of course they screwed up, but we should go a step further and ask which was the governing presiding officer of that area who essentially gave all the ticks to this particular player, and that guy should be fired as well. If that guy isn't fired, there's going to be no improvement in the system because he was the reason why this unit screwed up, right? He was the reason. But anyway, Central Drug Standard Control Organization instructed all state drug controllers to ensure that all raw materials used in medicines meet prescribed standards. So what were you doing earlier, guys? This is standard job for you. Moving on. TRI may review plan to allow distributors to break bouquets. So there's a fight going on between broadcasters and the distributors, the Tata Play, the DTH guys, Airtel, and so on and so forth. Now, why is this fight going on? We've discussed a lot. You should know, viewers of Thinkers Frequency. Why are distributors and broadcasters fighting amongst themselves? Because TV is dying, right? What happens in dying industries is fights. Because the pie gets smaller, to preserve the pie, people start fighting. You'll not see fights happening in a very fast growing industry, right? That'll be competition. But when fights amongst stakeholders start happening, you know what's happening, right? And that's exactly what's going on. So TRI is reviewing a plan which says that the distributors, that is the Tata guys or Airtel guys or whoever sells the DTH plan, they'll be able to, Dish TV people, they'll be able to break the bouquets of broadcasters and choose the plans, which channels to sell to people. Now that screws up a lot of plans because these things are very important for broadcasters, right? Broadcasters need to have their own set of offerings because they need to sell ad inventory. So if Z and these broadcasters cannot decide what comes with their package, right? If these distributors can pick and choose, it's very bad news for the broadcasters. So let's see what happens in this area. For now, TRI is favoring the distributors to essentially pick and choose. It says it's going to help the consumers with their bill going down. Well, you're going to kill the industry. You're going to kill the industry. Retail leasing jumps 45% in the September quarter. Top 8 cities, we talked about this. Why is retail leasing growing up? Well, we know why it's growing up, right? A lot of GCCs, a lot of offices, a lot of flexible offices and so on and so forth. So, a lot of office activity. Moving on. Starlink gears up to start SATCOM services in India. We talked about this. Starlink is the whole SATCOM play is gonna go 10x in the next 2 years. It's one of the two industries which is gonna go 10x in the next 2 years. One is this, one is the Wegovy thing, right? Manjaro, the GLP drugs. These two industries are gonna skyrocket in ways that nobody can understand. So, if we can be part of it in some way, it's awesome. Titan reports 20% revenue growth. That's awesome. Most of it is jewelry prices going up, right? Vodafone is saying that we are using any stocks related to these two. Well, that's what I'm trying to find, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Abhishek Sharma asks any stocks related to these two. So Satcom, you might not be able to find any stocks related to Satcom because Airtel, Jio is gonna list sometime. Airtel is already maxed out. I mean, it's a pretty good stock. It is. We've missed the rally with Airtel. There's no, when it comes to Satcom, it's not like these people have a small vendor, which is a small cap company where you can invest in. I don't think there is something like that, right? The GLP play has a lot of vendors. So you've got to look at some small or mid cap companies which are supplying the plastics or glasses and the syringes or whatever. Those companies are going to skyrocket as we discussed. So that's, and I still don't know because I'm not a trader, so I haven't really read which companies are supplying those things to these pharmaceutical companies. But whoever is that company, that small cap company is gonna go like 5x, 10x in no time. Nelco, is it related to satellite communication? Well, I'll have to read Mr. Sumat Kumar. Mr. Ashutosh Bhandekar says, my brother is a pharmacist. How can we leverage GLP revolution? Well, you're gonna make margins, right? You're gonna be selling these things, so that's obvious. If you're a pharmacist, you'll be basically selling these products, and this is gonna lead to a lot of revenue generation. Right now, 1 lakh people are taking GLP drugs. 10 lakh people are gonna take GLP drugs in just next 1.5 2 years. But I'll say, please don't sell these drugs. These are gonna be very, very risky. Moving on. Rural mobile penetration continues to lag. Significant mobile penetration disparity continues to exist between rural and urban India despite affordable tariffs and nationwide availability of 4G. We were talking about how Vodafone was talking about ARPU growth, average revenue per user, using AI-led pricing. Well, nobody wants to listen to this bullshit, right? These people are trying to tout this stock, saying that we are losing customers, that's sure. But we're going to fix it, and we're going to also fix the ARPU problem by using AI. Right? So we are an AI company now, guys. Come on, we need some money. Thermal power plants are getting a 5 lakh crore push, 5.5 lakh crores. How much is 5.5 lakh crore, guys? 1 lakh crore is $12 billion. So 5 lakh crore is going to be some $60 billion. $70 billion in thermal power plants. So they're saying that we're going to invest a lot of money in thermal, but don't worry, we are also going to invest a lot of money in renewable. Thermal is only to manage the grid stability. So you get the stable grid through thermal, and then you essentially use renewables as a buffer or taking away some aspect of it, right? So a lot of people, JSW Power, Torrent, NTPC, Adani Power, investing a lot of money in thermal. Man, a lot of money going into it. Moving on. Chinese joint ventures in ECMS. ECMS is Electronics Component Manufacturing Scheme. Well, we've been talking about that. The government really wants electronics component manufacturing to happen. And what happens with Chinese joint ventures is the tech transfer piece. Well, these people obviously don't want to do that, but India wants that. So India wants these joint ventures to happen and then tech transfers to happen right as they happen, right? So that's what the core agenda is. A lot of people will get hired, a lot of people will get skilled. And if tech can be also, let's say the IP can be shared, it's going to be good news for the country. But obviously, no leader would like to cede their position. Moving on. Content removal notices should be sent prudently, says Meety Seki. Executive power must be exercised to withstand judicial scrutiny. That's okay. Exigo is eyeing a 16% stake. So Exigo has done well, right? Exigo, the travel company, they IPO'd recently. And as they IPO'd, their stock has also done well, which is great news. And now they're looking at new shares, right? 16% share. Investor eyes 16% share. Moving on. We've talked a lot about rare earth to cut dependence. We've talked about 7,000 crores scheme. Railways spends record 1.42 lakh crore on capex in H1, right? 1.42 lakh crores, 1.5 lakh crores, some $18 billion approximately. That's very good news for the country. We've discussed how it's a good news, right? You remember that? By the way, state-run banks are talking about one nation, one election protocol. One nation, one election is something that the government, the ruling dispensation, has been batting for, and state banks say the PSB say that it's a very good idea because elections, different elections take a lot of banking days away, and also bank employees, they are used for election activities, and once that happens it basically becomes a very big problem. And if all elections happen at once in the country, it's going to really be very good news for the exchequer, so to speak. It's going to save a lot of money, save a lot of time. The contrary view to this is, because we don't talk politics, the contrary view is that if one nation, one election happens, the central power, the central elections overshadow the state elections. Now, state elections, the narrative is built that the nation is getting elections done, right? So the state elections lose their sort of grip on the narrative, which means that it's gonna favor the national party, national political party, right? So I don't know why PSBs came out in this statement, with this statement, but it's gonna attract a lot of political firestorm on these people. And now a lot of political chit chat would be on how the government is essentially influencing these people to sing to their tune, right? Dance to their tune, if that's the expression. And we're not gonna get into any of that. I just wanted to tell you that this perspective has two sides, so that people don't accuse me of, political BS. And with that, we'll come to the end of the 136th episode of Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis. I lost track of time. It's 9:17. We're gonna punch in anytime soon. I wish you a beautiful day personally and professionally. And I'll see you tomorrow, same place, same time, hopefully. I thank Mr. Barun Sharma, Mr. Varun Bhardwaj, Mr. Tushar Tiwari, Mr. Manju Madhabal, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, Mr. Sumant Kumar, Mr. Ashutosh Bhandekar, and everybody else who joined. Thank you so much and have a great day. Please take care. Bye-bye.